Samar Island is the third largest island in the Philippines and has one of the most extensive forest over limestone ecosystems in the country. This ecosystem is home to a wide array of uniquely adapted flora and fauna. Samar Island is known to be one of the centers of botanical diversity in the Philippines and has been nominated as a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site for its exceptional natural beauty and precious biodiversity. For these reasons, CONserve-KAIGANGAN, a biodiversity research program, was established. Kaigangan is a Samar local word that means forest over limestone. Our research program's mission is to assess and conserve the biodiversity in Samar Island's forest over limestone towards its sustainable management. One of our program's projects is the assessment of biodiversity and community structure in forest over limestone ecosystems. This component of our research aims to determine plant diversity and vegetation structure in various habitat types in forests over limestone, to determine animal diversity associated with forest over limestone, to identify functional classification of vegetation with its associated animal diversity, and to analyze the environmental factors influencing the prevailing structure of the biota. We conducted a comprehensive biodiversity assessment of forests over limestone in the municipalities of Paranas, Taft, and Giwan with remarkable findings. A combined total of 71 plant species were recorded from these municipalities, with at least 3 tree species classified as vulnerable based on the DENR updated national list of threatened Philippine plants. A total of 52 terrestrial vertebrate animal species were also recorded, including 5 amphibian species, 15 reptile species, 20 bird species, and 12 mammal species, with conservation statuses ranging from threatened to endangered and critically endangered, based on the DENR updated national list of threatened Philippine fauna. This knowledge will empower our stakeholders in these areas to make appropriate research-based conservation efforts for the protection of these ecosystems that harbor an assemblage of rare, endemic, and economically important flora and fauna. Through this program, people will be equipped with knowledge on forests over limestone biodiversity, including the ecosystem services that it can offer to the community. We at CONserve-KAIGANGAN continue to further raise awareness and capacitate national and local government agencies, especially local communities living in and around Samar's Kaigangan.
Hello everyone, welcome to Kaigangan Biodiversity webinar series. In March 2022, Ms. Elaine presented about the biodiversity of forests over limestone in Samar Island Natural Park, or also known as the SINP. Her study aimed to provide information on the outcomes of the plant in animal biodiversity in SINP. Second, to describe the tree community structure in SINP. Third, to highlight the significance of the nomination of SINP as a UNESCO Natural Heritage Site. This was conducted specifically in Paranas and Taf, Eastern Samar, a province in the Philippines located in the eastern Visayas region. Some of the highlight of the results of her study are the identification of some ecologically important amphibians, for example, the Philippine endemic Platymantis guentheri. In terms of reptiles, a very interesting one example is the Lycodon dumerili, which exhibits a widespread distribution and has been documented throughout the Mindanao Paeg, or the Pleistocene Aggregate Island Complex. Ms. Elaine discussed also about her interesting findings on birds, for example, the Bucerus hydrocorax semigaleatus, also known as the Philippine hornbill, a large species of hornbill endemic to the Philippines. In terms of flora, she found this new island record species, for example, the Tectaria calcarea, a fern or herb species with native range in the Philippines. Overall, Ms. Elaine emphasized that SINP is indeed worthy of its nomination as a UNESCO Natural Heritage Site because of its natural and cultural significance. The following month, Ms. Ren D. Obenya successfully presented a very good study on some threatened woody plant species of forest over limestone in the Philippine Islands. The study determined the threatened woody plant species in the forest over limestone in the Philippines and discussed the threats of the forest over limestone in the country. And of course, Samar Island is one of her study sites in addition to Cebu and Batangas sites. Ms. Ren presented the list of critically endangered species based on the Philippine DO Red List and the IUCN Red List. She also made an emphasis on economic uses of some of the identified threatened woody plant species in her study sites, for example, the Shiraya negrosensis, a Philippine endemic dipterocarp species, and our very own Tectona philippinensis with known natural populations in Batangas and in Mindoro. Learned a lot from UPLB Assistant Professor Marjorie de Los Angeles, who discussed about the ecology of understory plants of forest over limestone in Samar Island, Philippines. She documented plant understory species in forest over limestones and described the pattern of plant distribution with reference to ecological parameters using multivariate tools in Paranas, Taf, and Giwan, Samar. Assistant Professor Marjorie recorded 26 understory floral species divided into 21 flowering species and 6 fern species. Part of her study is to determine the species richness and diversity indices of Paranas, Taf, and Giwan. In addition, she found that the understory plant species from Paranas and Taf sites are highly affected by soil iron concentration and electrical conductivity, whereas plants from Giwan are highly associated with soil pH and other macro and micronutrients.
Good morning, everyone. We are thrilled to welcome you back to our CONserve-KAIGANGAN webinar series for 2025. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our sixth webinar episode. My name is Nova Helvano, and I will be your host for this event. Before we dive into our program, let us take a moment for our customary kumustahan. Kumusta po? So I kindly ask our Zoom participants to share their name, affiliation, and current location in the chat box so I can acknowledge your presence. For our Facebook Live participants, you may also write your name and affiliation in the comment section. So joining us via Zoom, we have Sir Chiron Arizala from the Foundation University Negros Oriental. Thank you, sir, for joining. We also have from Sultan Kadarat, if please, if I'm correct, is Sir Steven. We also have Sir Anatolio Pulimar. And from Samar State University, we have Ma'am Mary Rose. We also have a participant from IBS UPLB. I'm my colleague from the College of Science, ESO Main Campus. Hello, Ma'am Laila Daisy Acorin. Also joining us is Ma'am Mariela Angela. Hello, ma'am. We also have a participant from PUP Manila, Sir Hermoso. We also have Sir Deji Blas. Thank you, sir. We also have a participant from the University of La Salle, Santiago City, Isabela, Sir Kenneth. We have Sir Mark Joseph Jalo from Mindanao State University, General Santos. Good morning, Ma'am Rochi Bultron of MSU Buog, Zamboanga, Sibugay. We also have Anatolio Polinar from Visayas State University. We also have Ma'am Ivy Rose Estefano from Malaybalay, Bukidnon. Good day, Sir Kier Agad of UP Mindanao. Good morning, Sir Grant Harold Banayad. We also have Ma'am Rhea Cawes of Ilocos Sur Polytechnic State College. Good morning po. Also joining us from DNR Pasig City, we have Sir Peter John Ligson. From Palawan State University, we have Sir GB Arsaga. We have Sir Roden Mugas from Samar State University. Good morning from Ma'am Maureen Santos of Mabalacat City College. Maupay nga aga Sir Reuben Kalinog of University of Rizal System Tanay Main Campus. Wow, an alumni of ESO Salcedo. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. We also have Ma'am Claire Ann Almido from Batangas State University, TNEU Lobo Campus. We also have Mary Ann Laurenti of PSHS Ilocos Region. Thank you, Ma'am Noemi Timos of DNR Region 8. We also have Sir Daniel Matches of Socodive Mountain Province. We also have a participant from BSU, Ma'am Erica Anido. Good morning from CABSU, Nai Campus. A greeting from Sir Rolison Perlado. Thank you po. We also have our Facebook Live participants. We have Sir Jeruville from University of Eastern Philippines, Lawang Campus. We have Sir Christian Gimbao Libot, a BSES 4 student. We also have Ma'am Donaline Odon. Also joining us is Sir Haron Ibrahim. Good morning po. We have Sir Gimbao Libot Christian. We also have Mariela Darang, a BS in Environmental Science student of ESO Salcedo. Also joining us is Sir Jude Kyle Baldicañas from ESO Salcedo. We also have Eugenia Itay of VSU. Sir Vincent Janice of Ultra Sky Solution Limited. Sir Z. Deluso of Benguet State University. Ivy Grace Duran. Ma'am Regina Malara of Benguet State University, and Sir Jupil Macawili of Eastern Samar State University. Once again, a warm welcome to all of you for participating in our CONserve-KAIGANGAN webinar series. This webinar happens once or twice a month, so please stay tuned to our CONserve-KAIGANGAN Facebook page for the latest updates and announcements regarding upcoming sessions. I can already feel the excitement in the virtual air. However, before we proceed to the main agenda, I would like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. Please make sure to adhere to the following guidelines to ensure a smooth and respectful atmosphere. Please keep your microphones muted, especially during the speaker's presentation, to minimize background noise and distractions. If you have any questions or need clarifications while the speaker is presenting, please use the chat box to submit your inquiries. We will address them during the open forum segment. Towards the end of the session, a quiz will be given. After answering the quiz, you will see confirmation. At the bottom, you will see an evaluation link. So once you complete this form, you will receive e-certificates of attendance, which will serve as proof of your participation in today's event. Please ensure that the email address you provide is valid and accurate, as it will be used to verify your certificate. And now that we have established some important ground rules, let's move forward with our event. Our speaker this morning will talk about flora of the Cordillera Central Range, Northern Philippines, threats to upland biodiversity in the face of changing climate. He is a PhD graduate in botany from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He is currently a faculty researcher under Department of Biology at Benguet State University. His research interests include plant taxonomy, freshwater ecology, and environmental science. To date, he has published 38 research articles in various internationally indexed journals, with most of his research focusing on the plant diversity of the Cordillera Central Range in Northern Philippines. He is an avid learner of the mentoring craft, having been mentored by no other than Dr. Inocencio Ibu Jr. himself. He also actively seeks means to adequately mentor students to become effective researchers themselves. Everyone, please join me in welcoming our resource speaker, Dr. John T. Napaldet. Thank you, sir. Good morning po.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. Pleasant morning to one and all. Thank you, CONserve-KAIGANGAN, for having me this morning, for giving me this chance to present some of our studies in this platform. So the title of my presentation is Flora of the Cordillera Central Range, Northern Philippines, Threats to Upland Biodiversity in the Face of Changing Climate. In the title, I stated here biodiversity, but in my presentation, I would be primarily dealing with plant diversity. But I still believe that that title is justifiable because we all know that at the foundation of major food web and food chain are plants. So therefore, any major changes or effects on plants would ultimately affect the biodiversity in general. This would be the general flow of my presentation. So first, I would be presenting a brief introduction. Then after that, I would be presenting 4 study cases. Study 1 would be on Mount Natuo in Bugas, Benguet. Study 2 on Alapang Communal Forest in La Trinidad, Benguet. Study 3, case 3 would be on the secondary forest in Tajangan, Tuba, Benguet. And then study 4 would be specific on plant, namely Biscophaea javanica. Then after that would be the conclusion and implications. So to start, I do believe we are all aware or familiar with the concept of global warming and climate change, particularly that we are experiencing the adverse effect of this in our locality. We are experiencing major more heat wave, dry seasons, and wet seasons. And at the global scale, it was already recorded that we have a significant increase in the global temperature of around 1.18 degrees Celsius. And we all know that these climatic variables are interrelated. So any major changes or major changes on any climatic variable would have an effect on other variables, resulting to climatic variability. And however, this resulted to major speculations of climatic disaster. Say, for example, the loss of the Kilimanjaro glaciers in way back in 2022. Scientists have predicted that at around 2015 to 2020, that the glacier would be lost. But until now, that glacier still exists. Another major speculation would be the unprecedented sea level rise from the melting of ice caps glaciers. It would result to flooding, inundation of major coastal cities. But thank God, hindi pa rin naman nangyayari ang mga yan. Nonetheless, we cannot still say na global warming or climate change is not true, because we are in fact experiencing the major effects of these events, particularly with the recent Tabagat. Several areas here have experienced major landslide, and at the low-lying areas are major floodings naman. Aside from that, one major effect of global warming and resulting climatic variability would be the extinction or endangerment of several species. And primarily, this would actually the focus of my presentation, the effect of global warming and the resulting climatic variability on biodiversity and ecosystem in general. There is one major question that we need to answer, particularly in tropical setting, and this would be how does global warming, warming temperature, and resulting climatic variability affect biodiversity? Okay, and we need to answer this one because of the following reason. First, it's no longer undeniable that one of the major environmental factor affecting biodiversity is global warming and resulting climatic variability, affecting forest biodiversity, species functioning, and distribution. And also, this is one of the major data gaps in literature, the documentation on the effect of global warming to forest biodiversity. Okay, according to Feley et al. 2023, trying to understand the responses of tropical ecosystems to global warming is a daunting task due to the extreme taxonomic, functional, and ecological diversity. So we all know that in tropical countries such as ours, we are blessed with high species richness, high biodiversity, and understanding the effect of one phenomenon or environmental factor would really be very daunting because of the complexity of our biodiversity. But nonetheless, amidst these challenges, as we all know, that there are always two sides of a coin. So same is true with our case. We might be seeing this as challenges, but at the other side, there could be opportunities from this case. Particularly studying the effects of biodiversity on tropical forest biodiversity as they adapt to this condition. Okay, and we have been doing this one, trying to answer this question in our locality, namely the Cordillera Central Range. And for us to really document this, we need to conduct baseline studies as a point of comparison. So we need to establish baseline studies and then conduct another set of studies after 10 years, after 20 years, or after 30 years, or whatever available year that we could perform this one for comparison. So we would be looking or comparing the plant diversity, plant characters through time series data. Okay. And as I've mentioned, we have been trying to perform that in our locality, namely the Cordillera Central Range. Aside from being most conducive for us, actually, this area is also ideal for conducting global warming studies because it's because of the elevational gradient that is predominant in the locality. We have very high mountain peaks here. For example, we have Mount Pulag, we have Mount Santo Tomas, Mount Paway, Mount Amoyao, and so on and so forth. And then at the gorges or at the canyons, we have lower elevation, resulting to different elevational gradient, and the diversity, the responses of plants, plant diversity and plant characters along that elevational gradient could give us a hint on how plant would adapt to changing climatic condition. Okay, so yeah, so this makes our locality ideal for this kind of studies. So next one, I'm going to present one of our study conducted in Mount Natuwa in Benguet, and the whole result of the study was already published actually It's available online with this study title. And what makes the study area ideal for conducting this type of studies is that because it's previously a part of the Mount Data National Range, but due to forest conversion in the encroachment of vegetable gardens, the study area was actually isolated. It's an isolated mossy forest patch, okay, as illustrated in the diagram. So this is Mount Natuo communal forest, and then surrounding that are vegetable farms, the brown dots. Okay, and we have 5 sapling stations established in that area. At the lower slopes, we have station 1, 2, 3, station 1, 2, and 5 rather, and then at the summit stations, we have station 3 and 4. We implement the usual nested plot method, okay, and we were able to document a total of 168 species under 116 genera and 16 families. And majority of these plants, or rather almost all of these plants, are native in the country. So 50%, more or less 50% are endemic, and 50% are indigenous with only 2 exotic species. And there are also several conservation important species here. When we say conservation important species, these are just a general term that we use to refer to threatened, to species that have conservation status, such as threatened, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered. The dominant species here are Viburnum glaubericum, Cyplocus pendula, and Platea excelsa. These are actually low-lying trees, small trees. Okay? These are the dominant canopy species. And usually they are covered by several epiphytes, usually orchids, ferns, and as well as high quantity of bryophytes. Okay? And what could we infer from the study in relation to our topic, answering the question, the effect of global warming to plant diversity or biodiversity in general? We found out that there are several native species in the study site that could be affected in the event of unprecedented increase of temperature and climatic variability. So yeah, with the threat of global warming, several native species could be endangered or could be threatened. But nonetheless, the existence of this of the high species richness and endemicity in the study area is a testament that amidst the ongoing global warming and climate change, still our biodiversity persists. So amidst the global warming or the threat of climate change, still up to now, nagsasurvive pa rin yung plant diversity natin. But the question there is, for how long? So how much more increase of temperature would happen before our plant diversity could no longer adapt or could no longer survive? Okay? And we hypothesize that because of the current condition wherein the dominant trees in the summit area are understory shrubs at lower elevation, we actually observed that there is somewhat a turnover event. The dominant trees in the summit or the top portion of the mountain site that we studied are actually understory shrubs at lower elevation. So we hypothesize that in the event of unprecedented warming in the area, the lower tolerant trees could creep upward towards the summit, and the current dominant small trees in the summit would not be totally lost, but would actually just form the understory shrubs. Okay? So sa tingin namin, hindi totally mawawala yung mga dominant trees in the area, but rather they would just serve as the understory saplings or shrubs. Okay. Aside from this result, we also see some research opportunity in the study, wherein because of the massive forest conversion in the province, a lot of mossy forests are being converted into vegetable farms because it's a lucrative industry, and then more or less it's the national government cannot totally control or cannot totally prevent that. Because of this situation, we are proposing for a site-specific small area protection of areas with high endemic and conservation important species. And for us to do that, we need first to identify specific sites for protection. And unfortunately, the current biodiversity indices that we have are not ideal for this purpose. That is why in the study, we crafted or we generated indices that would identify specific sites for conservation or for protection. And we call them the endemicity and conservation important indices. So these are actually mathematical formula generated from Likert scale models and weighted mean formulas. For the details of how we derive this formula, they are elaborated in the published article. So if you're interested to look into that, you could just refer to that article. But the idea here of these indices is to identify areas for specific for conservation or protection. And it's just a matter of determining the number of endemic species, conservation important species, then entering into the formula, and you would arrive at values ranging from 0 to 100. And higher values would mean higher protection, higher priority areas for conservation and protection. Okay, so we crafted actually we made some criteria for that. So areas that with values of 81 to 100 would be extremely ideal for conservation and protection because they have high number of endemic species and conservation important species. Okay, next one. Let's move to another study site, the Alapang Communal Forest in Trinidad Benguet. Also, the full paper of this is already available. It's published in Taiwan, yeah. And this would actually represent lower or rather mid-elevation pine forest. Okay. And this is the study site. It's actually one of the one of the 4 protected communal forests in Trinidad. And in the study site, we observe 2 primary forest community, the pine forest at the ridge stations, okay, this ones, and then we have broadleaf dominant stations at the depression slopes, okay. And in conducting, again, the usual nested plot method, we were able to document 187 species belonging to 145 genera and 70 families. And if we're going to compare the plant diversity between the pine ridge stations, this ones, and the broadleaf dominated depressed stations, there is a glaring difference in the plant diversity or species richness. The depressed stations have much higher plant diversity as compared to the pine forest. Okay, but if we're going to account for the carbon stock or carbon sequestration, the trend is opposite. The depressed stations would have much lower carbon stock and carbon sequestration potential as compared to the pine stations. So somewhat there is a trade-off. Sa depressed stations, they have higher plant diversity but lower carbon stock and carbon sequestration potential. The other way around for the pine forest stations, wherein they have relatively lower plant diversity but higher carbon stock and carbon sequestration potential. Okay. And we could have 4 major highlights from this study. First, the protection of the area leads to lower disturbance, resulting to higher plant diversity in a supposedly low diversity pine forest. The usual assumption before is that pine forest would have low plant diversity because of the usual or the common occurrence of forest fires. But this study site, the Alapang Communal Forest, is being protected from such. And we are observing now, because of that event, its protection, resulting to higher plant diversity. Second, lower diversity areas could still contribute to carbon stock and carbon sequestration, thus contributing against global warming and climate change, specifically referring to the pine stations, pine-dominated ridge stations, usually drier yung condition dito. Okay, and because of that, it's usually dominated by pine forest, pine trees, Pinus cassia. And in general, again, it has lower plant diversity in comparison with the broadleaf dominated depressed slopes. Usually, mesic yung condition dito, and the relative humidity is really, really high, okay, resulting to a cooler condition. Okay. So thirdly, in the event of unprecedented warming, deforestation could serve as refugee areas or sanctuary areas for cold-adapted plant species. We hypothesize that in the case of ongoing or more worse global warming, the conditions here would not drastically change. Still, would have a cooler condition, and this is where cold-adapted plant species could still thrive. And fourth one, we also see a opportunity here wherein the continuous protection of a pine forest, particularly from forest fires, would facilitate its continuous transformation from a pine forest to a lowland evergreen forest. And this would result to, again, increasing the plant diversity. Grade one, we have the third case, community case, the case of the secondary forest in Tajangan Tuba Benguet. So again, the full paper of this is also available online. It's already published in 2023. And this is the study site. It's actually it's located on a sloping area, and we conducted the massive plant inventories here along the elevational gradient. Okay, and this area also have different land uses, experiencing different levels of human disturbance. So here, this is a secondary forest. This is a human managed forest, company forest actually, and then this is another secondary forest. These are scrublands, recovering scrublands. Also this one, and these ones are agricultural lands. Okay, so it's actually ideal. The study site is ideal for study on how human disturbance and elevation that would have a connotation with the climatic condition would affect the plant diversity in a sloping area like this one. And we were able to document a total of 267 species belonging to 222 genera and 78 families. Majority of the plant species here are of the least concern or common status condition, status. And nonetheless, there were 15 conservation important species. And if we're going to compare the plant diversity between sampling stations, in general, they could be classified as secondary forest stations and forest clearing stations. There is a glaring difference of the plant diversity. Much higher plant diversity was observed in secondary forest stations and much lower in forest clearing stations. Also, if we're going to compare the number of native species and exotic species between these sampling stations, much higher exotic species were observed in the forest clearing stations, particularly in the conventional farms. Okay, while native species are more dominant, are higher in number in the secondary forest stations. And we further analyzed that using canonical correlation analysis, and we found out that the level of human disturbance directly, or it's the major factor affecting the type of the plant diversity and the level of plant diversity in the study site. Okay, while the effect of elevation is more or less secondary. And if we're going to summarize the highlight from the study, we have the following. First, the level of human disturbance is significantly associated with the species richness, species composition, dominant species, and biodiversity indices. Greater human disturbance, as in the case of conventional farms, results in lower species richness, predominantly with composition, dominant with species, and lower biodiversity indices in general. On the other hand, lesser human disturbance, as in the case of secondary forest, leads to higher species richness, greater native species composition, the dominance of indigenous species, and higher diversity indices. So in short, the level of human disturbance directly affect the level of plant diversity. Lower plant diversity would result from greater human disturbance and vice versa. Lower greater plant diversity would result from lesser human disturbance. Okay. Second, the effect of elevation that is corresponding directly related to temperature is in general secondary, meaning not on species count but on species composition. Warm adapted species in lower elevation and cold adapted or tolerant species in mid to high elevated stations. The prevalence of common weeds from low to high elevation stations could be more prevalent in the case of unprecedented increase of temperature. So we observe that in areas that with high human disturbance, particularly conventional farms, whatever the elevation is or are, it generates a more or less common structure, plant structure or plant community, and in general, those are weed dominated areas. Okay, but on the other way around, on the flip side, the prevalence of shaded condition brought back by intact forest canopy could minimize the encroachment of exotic species while preserving the needed condition by the native plant species. So baliktad naman sa less disturbed areas, secondary forest, because of the intact canopy, it would preserve the native species while minimizing the exotic species. Okay, so the fourth one, the last one that we want to share would be specific for the case of a particular plant, namely Biscafeia javanica. Hindi pa lumalabas yung result, ano? It's still under review pa yung paper na to. But for those who are not familiar with the plant, these are some illustrations of the plant. It's actually a trifoliate and then widely distributed tree under the family Phyllantaceae. Locally, in our place, it's known as tuwal or dail. I think it's known in other local name in other localities. What makes this plant ideal for this kind of studies, identifying its adaptation to different climatic condition, is because it's widely distributed in the country and other Southeast Asian countries. And in this study, we documented its stomatal and leaf characters at different elevations, starting at 300 to 1,600. That's the elevation gradient where we were able to find this plant, this tree. Okay, and we also compared the stomatal and leaf characters as well as air quality parameters at different shading condition. So more or less, the study is actually two factorial. We look at the effect of elevation as well as the effect of shading condition on the stomatal characters, leaf characters, as well as the surrounding air quality parameters. And these are our findings. So first, we look into the effect of a shading condition and the different elevation at the stomatal characters of the plant. So figure A here would represent stomatal density, figure B, stomatal intensity, figure C would be on stomatal width, figure D would be on stomatal length. It's very glaring in the figure, kitang-kita naman kagad that there are major differences on the stomatal characters as affected by shading condition and then by elevation. So in general, yung stomatal density natin and stomatal intensity, it's generally higher at sun-exposed leaves, while lower at shaded leaves. Also, between elevation naman, at higher elevation, tumataas yung stomatal density and stomatal intensity. The trend is opposite for stomatal sizes, stomatal width and stomatal length. Sun-exposed leaves generally have smaller stomata, lower stomatal width and lower stomatal length, as well as in terms of elevation. Okay, and if we're going to look at leaf characters naman, this one, also the shading condition and elevation would have a major effect. Okay, so in general, smaller leaves are observed at the sun-exposed condition. This ones, mas maliit sila pag mas exposed sa sun, and then mas maliit din sila at lower elevation. Okay, so yeah. That's a trend. And we try to relate these stomatal characters and leaf characters with the air quality parameters. So more or less, same is true with the stomatal length and stomatal characters and leaf characters. The air quality parameters is affected by the shading condition and the elevation. Okay, so in general, this one, A would be referring to light intensity, B for relative humidity, C for air temperature, and D for carbon dioxide. Temperature and light intensity obviously would be higher at sun-exposed leaves and lower at shaded leaves. More or less, carbon dioxide did not differ significantly between treatments, but relative humidity has a different trend. Okay, so in general, relative humidity is higher in shaded leaves and then lower at higher conditions. Okay, we further try to analyze this condition by using canonical correlation, and we found out that stomatal density, stomatal intensity, they are more correlated with increasing light intensity, increasing temperature, and increasing elevation. On the other hand, stomatal sizes, leaf measurements, these are more correlated with increasing relative humidity. So if we're going to summarize the major highlights of the study, we found out that stomatal density and stomatal index are higher in sun-exposed leaves and higher elevation. But the opposite trend is observed in stomatal sizes with sun-exposed and higher elevation trees having smaller stomata. In terms of leaf measurements, shaded leaves were generally larger than semi-shaded and least and sun-exposed leaves, while lower elevation trees were generally larger than higher elevation ones. Third, air quality variables were shown to significantly affect the stomatal and leaf characters, wherein stomatal density and index increases with increasing light intensity, temperature, and elevation, while stomatal sizes, leaf measurements, increases with increasing relative humidity and carbon dioxide levels. Fourth one, we observe interesting trends between air quality and edaphic factors. However, I did not really present the edaphic factors in this presentation because more or less hindi po significant yung effect niya. Particularly the general trend of air temperature, relative humidity, soil pH, and carbon dioxide with each other. Opposite with light intensity, elevation, phosphate, potassium, nitrogen, organic matter, and then moisture content. So if we're going to summarize the major points in this presentation, we were able to generate some baseline studies that could help us understand on how global warming and climate change would affect the plant diversity and biodiversity in general. And findings from these initial baseline studies are the following. We cannot deny that several native species could be affected in the event of unprecedented increase of temperature and climatic variability. But nonetheless, there are built-in factors that could minimize impacts of global warming and climatic variability. We have the following. At the ecosystem level, particularly at high mountain areas, high mountain peak areas, current dominant trees could be dominant shrubs in the case of the invasion of heat-tolerant trees, the one that I mentioned as a turnover. Okay. And then at mid-elevation forest ecosystem naman, depression slopes could be refuge areas for cold-adapted plant species. And then another one, intact forest canopy could mitigate invasion of exotic species while providing ideal condition for native species. So again, the value of minimizing human impact to forest ecosystem in order that the forest ecosystem could still, in a way, minimize or mitigate the effect of global warming and climate change. Then lastly, at the species level, plants would adopt higher stomatal density and stomatal index, but smaller but thicker leaves with increasing global temperatures. So that would end my presentation, and I hope you learned something from me. So thank you, and I could.
Thank you very
If there will be
much,
some question,
Dr.
I would
Napaldet,
be
for that
willing to
incredibly
accommodate
informative
them.
presentation. Thank you, Sir Napaldet, for that incredibly informative presentation. I am confident that our participants learned so much from you today. So as we are transitioning into our open forum segment, I would like to invite our Zoom participants to share their questions in the chat box. Also, for our FB Live participants, please share your questions in the comment section. I will read your questions for our speaker to address. So while you write your questions, let me read a few questions we received during the pre-registration for today's webinar. Sir Napaldet, we have a question po from Ma'am Christine Bultron, a student from Caraga State University. I also posted the question in the chat box. So the question is, how does climate change affect biodiversity, including the risk of species extinction in vulnerable areas? And what are its impacts in humans and ecosystems? Additionally, what measures can be taken either by governments or agencies to mitigate these effects and protect threatened species po?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Medyo general, so I could, I think, could give some specific answers specific for our locality. As mentioned in the presentation, we observed that there are several species being threatened by global warming, by increasing temperatures, particularly plants that are adapted to
Sir Johns? I think parang nawala po si Sir Napaldet. So while waiting for him, perhaps you can post your questions in our chat box. So para pagdating po ni Sir, ma-address po niya.
sorry for that, bigla akong nawala. So I'm saying, I think the first part of the question, the second part, what can be done to minimize the impact of more
Yes po, the question po Sir ay
planting native trees
what measures can be taken either by the governments or
to
agencies
change?
to mitigate these effects and protect threatened species po? Yun yung second question niya. I will repeat the question po. How does climate change affect biodiversity,
Go ahead.
including the risk of species extinction in vulnerable areas? And what are its impacts on humans and ecosystem? Sir, can you hear me po?
Yep. Bigla akong nawala kanina, I'm so sorry for that.
Opo,
Yung internet
opo,
connection
sir.
ko ata, nag-break.
Okay po,
Pero
sir.
bumalik na.
Opo. Sir,
Yeah.
nasa chat box din po yung tanong, pero I can read it for you po. How does climate change affect biodiversity, including the risk
So I
of
guess
species?
the first
Yes
one,
po.
wherein I mentioned that case.
Opo. So nawawala po ata si sir.
In our locality, yung luwan naka I must partly that
Sir, we can't hear you po. So, I guess nawala na naman po si Sir.
nawawala ako.
Ayaw
Sorry.
po.
Uh, so yeah, I think as I mentioned, if ever hindi nakat yun, I mentioned the one way of mitigating the impact of global warming and climate change would be to prioritize planting of native trees, particularly in our tree planting activities. We all know that native trees are more resilient to come from climatic variability or climate change. Yeah. Uh,
Okay po, Sir. Sir Steven is actually raising his
aside from
hand.
that, by maintaining the canopy, better canopy, and that would provide activities at birth. Sige, ma'am. Go ahead po.
Yes, sir. Akala ko tapos na po yung sumagot. So, Sir Steven po, thank you po sa sagot niyo, sir. Sir Steven po ng SKSU ay nag-raise po siya ng hand. Sir,
May
you
tanong
can,
ata si Sir Steven.
opo, you can po chat your question or pwede din po kayo, sir, siguro mag-open ng iyong microphone.
Hello
If may
po,
tanong
good morning
kayo.
po. I'm audible po.
Yes po, sir.
Uh, Sir, Sir, Sir Jones, volunteer po. Hello, sir.
Siguro po mahina po ang ating internet ngayon. Sir Steven, pwede din po niyong i-chat na lang
Sir.
po sa chat box yung question niyo po, and perhaps Sir Napaldet din po at pag mahina po talaga yung kanyang internet connection, pwede din pong i-chat na lang din po yung sagot, and I can read po the question and the answer as well.
Sige po, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Okay po. Wait lang po, ma'am. I-tap ko lang po.
Hi, good morning. So I think while we're waiting po for Sir Steven's question, we can first answer Sir Marvin's Tejada. So we have a message po from Zoom. So his question is, Sir Jones, is it advisable daw po ba to do extensive tree planting activities in the areas or the natural regenerative process of tree propagation and rewilding of own? So I think if pwede niyo pong i-chat or kung okay na po yung internet niyo, like, you can answer na po.
Yeah, if you hear me well, I have given the answer actually sa chat, but yeah, for me to answer that orally, Yeah, extensive tree planting activities are advisable as long as those are particular area. However, in practice and observation, if the area is very denuded, uh, it would be best to plant fast-growing nitrogen-fixing trees in order that it would first more mature or more native trees, more climatic native uh, climax tree species. Yeah.
Okay, thank you po, sir.
There's also a question here. Could you please share to us?
Yes, sir. There is another
Yeah,
question.
I'm looking at the chat. May tanong din
Okay
dito.
po. Actually, we have a question from Sir Daniel Matches. Cordillera has an introduction of fast-growing exotic species such as alnos, caliandra, and others. Are these effective in combating climate change and enhancing biodiversity, or should native species be prioritized for conservation? What species would you recommend for agroforestry coffee production?
Uh, uh, yeah, it's a prevalent or it's a common problem here in our locality, wherein we have the introduction of native species, particularly yung alnos. Ano? But I would not be totally against alnos actually, because it's a need for our agroforestry farmers. We need alnos trees actually is very a good provider of nitrogen. So our coffee under alnos is a very good practice in terms of production. Uh, in usually denuded areas, it's a good cover because it's a fast-growing one, and while it outcompetes the native species, at least it would provide the protection from erosion for the short term. However, perhaps in the long term, in the long term effect, we could plant slow growing but more climate resilient native trees. Say for example, we would have Erythrina sumborbrands would be ideal replacement for alnos because it's also a nitrogen fixing tree. But that's uh, so yeah. Still, native trees would be ideal. Native trees would function. So yeah, still native tree as well as alnos here in Benguet. I think it doesn't really have say perhaps siguro because of the massive uh, forest conversion. So, yung mga dating native trees, wala na talaga. Yung pamalit natin, yung mga ants. But for study side, in parts of Bali, doon namin nakita na medyo negative yung effect ng mga aldos trees. It's, as I mentioned, very fast growing. So, in areas na may soil erosion sa place na yan, outcompeting yung other native trees. Okay.
Okay po, thank you, sir. So we have our questions na from Sir Steven. Nakalagay na po sa chat box. So based on the study and the result you presented earlier, what are the possible factors or challenges in the Cordillera Central Range that could affect the upland biodiversity region, particularly in the elevations or sampling stations and the future native species data for the next 10 or to 20 years?
Uh, it would it could be it would be dependent, I think, on the level of human disturbance. If there would be less human disturbance in that particular area, we hypothesize that eventually native trees would dominate in there. Uh, However, in reality, you cannot really uh, protect, and preserve that really without human disturbance. Uh, so I think that's a reality of life now, that we really have to incorporate uh, human activities in our protection conservation plans. Uh, that is why in our one of our study we develop yung endemic and conservation importance index for us to identify particular sites, small areas that would be against any human activities, because these areas would have high number of endemic and conservation importance species. We would, I think that model of management, because we would present this to the local community, local local LGU, and we would identify cutting, totally no cutting, totally no disturbance. While other areas that have lower index would still be allowed for disturbance, moderate disturbance. Okay. Uh, Possible factors that could affect biodiversity factor would be human factor, but with uh, more increasing global temperature, global temperatures are affecting the locality. I think it adapted mild or wet conditions. One also, ecological knowledge and practices is very very strong still in several areas in the Cordillera. Management activities being performed, being done, and it has some success. However, because of need to cut trees for household, for firewood and so on and so forth, still in some way medyo affected yung traditional practices ng mga yan.
Okay po. Thank you so much, Sir Napaldet, for that lively and captivating discussion. I believe we have successfully addressed all the audience queries within our limited time frame. Now let us proceed with presenting the certificate to our esteemed resource speaker. Please allow me to read the citation. Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Dr. Jones T. Napaldet in recognition of your valuable contribution as the resource speaker for the webinar entitled Flora of the Cordillera Central Range, Northern Philippines, Threats to Upland Biodiversity in the Face of Changing Climate, conducted under the CONserve-KAIGANGAN Biodiversity Webinar Series on August 12, 2025 via Zoom. Signed, Maria Celeste in Banatecla Hilario, Project Leader. Thank you again po, sir. For our next webinar on September 9, 2025, our next resource speaker is Dr. Javis Joshua M. Flores, a senior lecturer of the University of the Philippines Open University and a freelance environmental consultant and licensed drone pilot. He will be sharing to us the applications of geospatial artificial intelligence in biodiversity conservation. I hope that you will be joining us also on September 9, 2025. So at this time, I would like to invite everyone to turn on their cameras for a group photo op. Everyone, please
So,
open
smile
your
lang po
camera
tayo.
po.
Smile lang po. Wait lang po. And okay, 1, 2, 3. Next slide po. 1, 2, 3. Okay po. Last slide po. 1, 2, 3. Thank you po.
Again, thank you all for joining us today. So as we prepare to conclude, please remember to scan the QR code displayed on your screen or click the link shared in the chat box to answer the quiz and to receive the evaluation link. Your feedback is invaluable to us. Thank you again for participating, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you po, Sir Napaldet. Thank you po. To our participants, thank you po for joining us today.
Thank you din. Sige. Sige.
Thank you very much po, Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Doc Jones.
Samar Island is the third largest island in the Philippines and has one of the most extensive forest over limestone ecosystems in the country. This ecosystem is home to a wide array of uniquely adapted flora and fauna. Samar Island is known to be one of the centers of botanical diversity in the Philippines and has been nominated as a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site for its exceptional natural beauty and precious biodiversity. For these reasons, CONserve-KAIGANGAN, a biodiversity research program, was established. Kaigangan is a Samar local word that means forest over limestone. Our research program's mission is to assess and conserve the biodiversity in Samar Island's forest over limestone towards its sustainable management. One of our program's projects is the assessment of biodiversity and community structure in forest over limestone ecosystems. This component of our research aims to determine plant diversity and vegetation structure in various habitat types in forests over limestone, to determine animal diversity associated with forest over limestone, to identify functional classification of vegetation with its associated animal diversity, and to analyze the environmental factors influencing the prevailing structure of the biota. We conducted a comprehensive biodiversity assessment of forests over limestone in the municipalities of Paranas, Taft, and Giwan with remarkable findings. A combined total of 71 plant species were recorded from these municipalities, with at least 3 tree species classified as vulnerable based on the DENR updated national list of threatened Philippine plants. A total of 52 terrestrial vertebrate animal species were also recorded, including 5 amphibian species, 15 reptile species, 20 bird species, and 12 mammal species with conservation statuses ranging from threatened to endangered and critically endangered, based on the DENR updated national list of threatened Philippine fauna. This knowledge will empower our stakeholders in these areas to make appropriate research-based conservation efforts for the protection of these ecosystems that harbor an assemblage of rare, endemic, and economically important flora and fauna. Through this program, people will be equipped with knowledge on forests over limestone biodiversity, including the ecosystem services that it can offer to the community. We at CONserve-KAIGANGAN continue to further raise awareness and capacitate national and local government agencies, especially local communities living in and around Samar's Kaigangan. Samar Island is the third largest island in the Philippines and has one of the most extensive forest over limestone ecosystems in the country. This ecosystem is home to a wide array of uniquely adapted flora and fauna. Samar Island is known to be one of the centers of botanical diversity in the Philippines and has been nominated as a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site for its exceptional natural beauty and precious biodiversity. For these reasons, CONserve-KAIGANGAN, a biodiversity research program, was established. Kaigangan is a Samar local word that means forest over limestone. Our research program's mission is to assess and conserve the biodiversity in Samar Island's forest over limestone towards its sustainable management. One of our program's projects is the assessment of biodiversity and community structure in forest over limestone ecosystems. This component of our research aims to determine plant diversity and vegetation structure in various habitat types in forests over limestone, to determine animal diversity associated with forest over limestone, to identify functional classification of vegetation with its associated animal diversity, and to analyze the environmental factors influencing the prevailing structure of the biota. We conducted a comprehensive biodiversity assessment of forests over limestone in the municipalities of Paranas, Taft, and Giwan with remarkable findings. A combined total of 71 plant species were recorded from these municipalities, with at least 3 tree species classified as vulnerable based on the DENR updated national list of threatened Philippine plants. A total of 52 terrestrial vertebrate animal species were also recorded, including 5 amphibian species, 15 reptile species, 20 bird species, and 12 mammal species, with conservation statuses ranging from threatened to endangered and critically endangered, based on the DENR updated national list of threatened Philippine fauna. This knowledge will empower our stakeholders in these areas to make appropriate research-based conservation efforts for the protection of these ecosystems that harbor an assemblage of rare, endemic, and economically important flora and fauna. Through this program, people will be equipped with knowledge on forests over limestone biodiversity, including the ecosystem services that it can offer to the community. We at CONserve-KAIGANGAN continue to further raise awareness and capacitate national and local government agencies, especially local communities living in and around Samar's Kaigangan.